Welcome back, and we're going to talk about an Eastern Conference team today that lost in round one, that lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the interesting thing is that Columbus this year, I don't know, it felt like they took a step forward, and yet if you look at the overall record, they did knock out Toronto in the play-in round, but then in the official round one, they lost in 5 games to Tampa. So it looks like they took a step back. I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, it's kind of a wash. This is a team that didn't have to win a Stanley Cup this year. And I still think Jarmo Kekalainen has them on the right track. With Kekalainen and Tortorella, I think that is a partnership that works very, very well. While John Tortorella's time in Vancouver was very short, his time in Columbus looks like it could go for a decade. Go as long as he wants to be there because it just works. It's a team that fits his style. Now, when we look at next season, really there's not a whole lot of change expected, and this might be one of those teams that benefits from flat cap on some level, where they don't have to worry about losing a bunch of guys because their contracts come up, at least for this year. So when we look at their playoff run, Liam Foodie is one that stands out as a guy who really made that development this year. That he really made his debut in the playoffs and looked fantastic. So I expect Foodie to be excellent next year as well. He's fast. He's got a good nose for the net. Good player. Dubois, of course, we'll see how much he costs them in the offseason, but I think Dubois has emerged as a pretty valuable number one center. Now, the key thing about Columbus, though, is he a true number one center? And that's the question mark. Bjorkstrand's expected to get some goals next year, as goals are kind of the issue with Columbus, right? Foligno, Jenner, and Arkinson round out the top 6. If Atkinson's healthy, if he's motivated, Atkinson can be a huge difference maker when it comes to the goal scoring. And then your maybe top 6, Gustav Nyquist is being paid along top 6 minutes, or being paid what a top 6 minute guy should be getting paid. If Foodie doesn't end up being ready for the top 6 role, Nyquist jumps back into that. Or Emil Bemstrom. Bemstrom had a pretty solid year this year as well. This may very well be a big year for him. And then if they decide they want to make more room, more cap space, does Wenberg end up being the odd man out? And Wenberg's been rumored to be on the trade block for a long time. He has. Wenberg has been... His name's been out there for ages. I figured I'd throw him up there because with the amount of money he makes and the amount of goals and points produced, I could understand if Kekalainen says this is the guy we're going to move on from. But he doesn't really have to. Not yet. So, on the blue line, their top 4 is pretty set. With most of these 2020, 2021 previews, when I'm talking about what next year might look like, I'll usually have at least a defenseman that can push into a top 4 role. I don't think there is one. Werenski and Jones are your top 2 easily. Jones played a ton of minutes against Columbus. Over 60 minutes in that one game alone. Gavrikov and Savard. I should mention that's the 5 overtime game before anybody goes, how can you play more than 60 minutes in a 60-minute game? Gavrikov and Savard round out the top 4. Gavrikov's a good young defenseman. This is not an old defense. Savard's the oldest of the 4, and honestly, I think they're in pretty good shape. And then if somebody gets hurt and they need Kukan to step in or Ryan Murray to step in here and there, they'll be fine. Their goaltending, what's interesting with Columbus too is coming into this past season, we all said, well, and I'm saying we all said as in like most Columbus fans as well, with the exit of Bobrovsky and the numbers put up in 2018, 2019 by Korpisalo, there wasn't really a lot of faith from fans, and I'm including myself in that, when it came to Columbus's goaltending. Merzlikins hadn't played a minute in the NHL, and Korpisalo had looked kind of pedestrian the previous season. And so when Columbus came out and said, well, we have faith in our goaltending, our answer was, well, of course you have to. You have to say that. And then Korpisalo was fantastic, and then when he got hurt, Merzlikins was fantastic, and then Merzlikins, something happens with him. You end up with Kivlenieks. Kivlenieks looked excellent as well. Now, Kivlenieks is 24 years of age. He's the one that's going to be interesting to see how things turn out. So, not only do they have to think about, well, Seattle's coming in, right? But Kivlenieks at 24 years of age, he may very well say, hey, I want a shot at an NHL job. and I'm a restricted free agent, so I'd like something to happen. Now, here's just as the Canuck fan and me coming out. Kivlenieks gets traded to Vancouver. Vancouver moves on from Markstrom. Kivlenieks becomes the backup to Demko until DiPietro's ready. That kind of thing. And I think Columbus could get back a draft pick, which is good because they don't have any. They don't have any. They traded away draft picks that right now aren't necessarily hurting them because they've got a good young team here and they should remain competitive. But maybe you get back a draft pick for Kivlenieks. And Jim Benning is more than willing to just take draft picks and ship them off. It's a bold strategy, but it seems to be working out okay for Vancouver. And it worked out pretty well for Columbus last year to ship out all the draft picks they did. They did get to the second round for the first and, to date, only time in their team's history. And we'll see whether or not Kivlenieks ends up sticking around. Because I think he showed in his brief call-up he's a pretty good goaltender. And again, at age 24, he may be of the mind of either I'm going to get a chance to play in the National Hockey League or I'd be better off playing in a European league and staying there. Now, their cap space is a little bit deceptive. It shows us $5.2 million. But I'm pretty sure that includes, because I did the math on it, pretty sure that includes Dubinsky, whose $5.85 million cap hit will come off as long-term injured reserve. He's not going to play again. So they really have about $11 million. And the interesting thing is, no unrestricted free agents. None. There's not a roster player who's going UFA. This comes back to Jarmo Kekalainen and his desire to build from within. His desire to make this team as good as possible for as long as possible. And they don't have any concerns. Again, with the cap, if, the Dubinsky contract comes off, that's $11 million. They have space. But how much is Pierre-Luc Dubois worth? So Pierre-Luc Dubois is a first-line center. And as I said previously, is he going to be a first-line center if Columbus is going to go from playoff team to an actual legit contender for a Stanley Cup? And I'm not sure of the answer on that. Would he be better as a second-line center? And do you want a more dynamic scoring forward as your number one center? And does Columbus have somebody within their organization who can fill that role? Foodie's a winger. Atkinson's a winger. Nyquist, Bemstrom, they're all wingers. Goal-scoring centers, tough to find. Boone Jenner, hard worker, not really an elite goal scorer. So this is something Columbus, I think, is going to have to figure out. And they're going to have to start by saying, okay, this is what Dubois is worth. So if you overpay Dubois right now, it probably doesn't hurt too much because you don't have a cap problem right now. But it may hurt later. Devon Shore, restricted free agent. He made $2.2 million this year. Pretty sure if they qualify him, they have to give him $2.2 million as the qualifier. I'm guessing they don't qualify him, and they might try to bring him back as an unrestricted free agent after the free agency date, which I'm pretty sure is still November 1st, but dates are changing, moving around. Stenlund, Gavrikov, Anderson, Kivlenieks, all restricted free agents. The interesting one there is Gavrikov. So with $11 million, that should afford you both Dubois and Gavrikov. But how much you pay these guys could very well decide what you're able to build after. And again, Kekalainen has made it clear that he's not looking to fix things on the free agent market. He doesn't think that bringing in big name free agents necessarily fix everything, which is a video I'll do again soon on teams that bring in the big name free agents and how that turns out for them and whether or not they get that Stanley Cup success. You seem to get that during the regular season and the postseason. Again, the best team usually wins. The team that's built together and grows together. And so Columbus is trying to do that. I think for the first time ever in their history, they have built a team that is expected to be in the playoffs or close to the playoffs every year. They overachieve rather than underachieving, which is really important for Columbus and their fans. And they've become a team that I think we can recognize as being a pretty well-run organization, and that's something that they struggled with as a team for many years. Their only draft pick in the first 3 rounds is number 21. They have their 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, but they do not have a second-round pick. They do not have a third-round pick. And what hurts in that is this is a deep draft. This is a draft where maybe that second or third rounder that you'd get, that might be a player that comes through in, say, 2 or 3 years, and you say, wow, that was a really good player for us to get. That did turn out to be a pretty good draft. So I don't know that Kekalainen necessarily is going to try to get extra picks. It's possible, but again, I don't know who you offer up in order to get those draft picks. I don't think Wenberg's necessarily going to bring that back if they decide to move on from Wenberg to make extra space. But again, the pressure's not there to necessarily do that. Again, I look at Kivlenieks as the interesting one. Obviously, they're going to keep Korpisalo and Merzlikins. So Kivlenieks, does he have any kind of value on the trade market, and what might they do with him? Columbus is going to be very interesting to watch, which has not always been the case. That expansion, Columbus and Minnesota, has at times been one that featured two kind of boring to watch franchises, but right now is not one of those times. And Columbus and Minnesota both have their own intrigue around them in this offseason. So let me know what you think Columbus needs to do, and how you feel about their center spot, and what might help to fix that. Do they need to move somebody else to center? Do they need to change their plan of attack? And how good can they be next year? And how long can they defy the critics before they do fall back out of a playoff spot? But for this year, they were in, and that's, I believe, 3 years in a row, which is a record for them. And, it takes time. It takes time to build towards a Stanley Cup, and maybe that's where things are headed for Columbus. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, Dubois, your opinion, let me know. I will talk to you again soon.